Okay, cool. So there were a couple of things that came to me to talk about. One was about a conversation I was having this morning with Michael, actually. And that was about focusing, which is it's a technique or a strategy in psychology that was developed, I think, in the 70s or 80s, maybe the 70s. But it's very unique and very simple. And the reason I found it fascinating is I found it on accident because I was looking for anyone who had recognized this sort of method that I noticed works really well. And then I found it was this psychologist figured it out as well in a different way. And I thought it was interesting that we kind of came to the same conclusion in different ways. But there's a lot to talk about and flesh out about focusing as such, as a technique. Even if you don't call it focusing, it's a very valuable modality, I guess, for coming in contact with more primary sense experience, more direct experience, and even non-dual, I think, once it's clarified. And I guess as an intro, this morning I was actually standing in my bathroom, and I heard a train whistle. And I don't hear a lot of train whistles in my house, but I will on occasion. And it must be a couple miles away. But when I heard that sound, it was so just clear and so it was so intimate, and it was the entire universe making that sound. And it struck me of like, even this whole lifetime of experience pales in comparison to the intimacy of one sound when it's really heard. And I thought, how would I relate that? How could I? And I kind of reflected on how I do try to relate this, and probably how ineffective that can even be until it really comes over you, or you stumble upon what that is I'm talking about. And you will stumble, everyone will stumble upon it at some point with this process we were talking about, with this opening, as if you let it continue, you will come in contact with this. And it's kind of funny when people do, they'll often say to me something like, well, when I recognize what non-dual really means in the senses, the no subject object split, they're usually very astounded, like how incredibly simple it is, and how it doesn't sound anything. It's not experienced anything like the descriptions make it sound. They're just astounded by it, and I know why that is, because it is so simple and it's so close that you can't even approach it. You can't. It's like trying to approach it from the viewpoint of having a mental map. Just the act of doing that, moving that way, is actually actively overlooking it. And I can refer to spiritual maps in this way and say this is a big problem with spiritual maps, but a spiritual map is just a special kind of map. The map making we do has been going on since we remember ourselves being a person. The type of map making I'm talking about has been going on our whole life. And so we can't help but, when we get a sense of that non-dual, or the sense of that intimacy in a sound or a sensation or consciousness, we can't help but recognize how much we want that, or how intimate that feels and real that feels. And then when the mind starts back up, we can't help but try to use the mind model, the mapping of the mind that tries to constantly map reality, we can't help but use that to try to find it again. But that's wrong action. It'll never work. So it's a frustration for us individually, because we do know this instinctually. We all know this instinctually at some level. So I was reflecting when hearing that train whistle of like, how can I just say this in a different way? Maybe not that I need to, but to try to relate it in a way that just clicks a little differently. And what struck me is like, there's nothing I can say about it. Anything I say about it is distancing from it, and it gets the mind activated. And then it's like you kind of, you back away from it, and then you chase it as a subject, as an object. That's how our minds function all the time, right? They're always playing catch up with themselves. And so it's like I've said before, you hold the carrot on the stick in front of yourself and chase it. Like no matter how fast you run, you're never going to catch that carrot. And if you try to sneak up on the carrot's always one step ahead of you, because you created the carrot, right? You created the mental map of what intimacy is supposed to be, because you remembered it. And that's how, and you didn't do it. That's just what our minds do. They remember, and then they project into the future. And then another thought comes in and says, oh, I can get to that. And then it like chases itself like a slinky, right? And so, so no term can relate to this. No pointing description really can relate to this. And yet my instinct was like, and yet we all know this. We all clearly have access to this radical intimacy, this natural completion of one sense, of just one sound, the sound of that train whistle, or this, because then as I was like contemplating this, I could feel it in everything again. It's like, it's everything. It's the vibration of the sensations in the body, and the vibration and the sensations in the body is also the background noise, or the hiss, or the ring in the ears, and it vibrates together. And it's also that same intimacy. It's it really makes one reflect back to childhood a lot of times, because you kind of remember it before you remember thinking of yourself as a self, but you remember that intimacy, and you might relate it to your parent or a mother or something like that, but it actually goes even back before that. This is the kind of intimacy that it's primal. It's inherent to physical existence, even of inanimate objects or non-self-conscious beings. Like an animal that doesn't think of itself as an animal, just walks around and experiences the environment. But to that being, it's also, this intimacy is clear, undisputable, it's full contact, full participation all the time. So then I realized the only thing I can really say about it is what it's not. I can only kind of get to it subtractively. I'm learning to use synths, which are electronic instruments that you use on a digital audio workstation to make sounds. And there's like subtractive synths and additive synths. And a subtractive synth just takes a sine wave or a sound and it subtracts from it. And by doing that, it modifies the sound in a million different ways. So it's kind of like that, where all I can do is subtract from the cognitive function that's always taking a picture of reality, which is distance, and then reconstructing that in something that's called a future, which is only another thought. There's no such thing as a future, and then chasing it. And then the thought chases the thought, chases the thought, right? That activity, all I can really do is subtract from that in a certain way. And then non-dual, the natural experience of a sensation or any sensory phenomenon, a sound or the visual field, naturally reveals itself. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to say what it's not. I'm going to try to point through this subtractive aspect, I guess. Maybe it'll help, maybe it'll work, and maybe it won't. Clarify it for all of us, and maybe it doesn't do anything. But So at the beginning, I was talking about one thing it's definitely not. It's not anything like the mind can make a map of. It's unmappable. It's too free to be mappable. It's too real to be mappable. It's too alive, right? The map is made out of snapshots of the mind. An image, the mind takes a picture, it makes an image. The mind remembers some dialogue about, oh, so-and-so described it this way. Those are snapshots. So the mind makes a snapshot, and by definition, a snapshot or a series of snapshots have consistency, solidity, and dependability. You know what they are. You feel satisfied. Oh, I know what that is. Okay. That which is having the picture taken of it when I'm talking in this way, the natural sense, the pure sound, it doesn't have those qualities. It doesn't have solidity. And to the mind's value system, that's somewhere between uninteresting and kind of scary. The mind wants solidity. But all I can suggest is when you're willing to let go, or that solidity dissolves and lets go of, the tendency to try to solidify experience into self and world, whatever. If that dissolves enough, you start to feel, oh, that solidity is like a very thin slice of reality. Because reality is, you could almost say the solidity is like one way things can be, which is a very thin slice. But reality is like infinite slices put together in some way that's alive and moving and fluxing all the time. So to let go of this kind of solidity is not a loss. It's not a net loss. It's a massive gain. But what comes with that is a certain kind of trust. You kind of click into the momentary flow. And so this connects to the next aspect that mind tries to impose upon reality that doesn't exist in natural reality or in that immediate sense. And that is when you can click into the momentary flow of conditions, however that happens, right? When you feel that participation, let's say that just immersion, which is vulnerability, it's unpredictable and it's innocent. As you experience that, this other aspect of mind is seen to not be there as well. And that is like a pattern. It's like a predictable pattern. The mind wants a pattern. It wants to know it's going to go like this, and then it's going to go like this, and then it's going to go like this. And by knowing that, I'm somehow making it happen. That's how the mind perceives it. Like by knowing how life is, like by knowing the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to pick up my phone and dial it. It doesn't perceive it like that. It perceives it like, no, I'm going to pick up my phone and dial it. But what it's actually saying is, I predict that the next thing that will happen is this body mind called Angela is going to pick up the phone and dial it. But it believes, because it thinks that sequence is real, it believes in the doer. It feels like I'm doing this stuff, right? Now, again, this feels like something we want. We want to feel like we're in control, or we think we want to feel like we're in control. The mind's value system says it's important to be in control, to have choices, to be an agent, to feel autonomous, right? And all I can say is, as that dissolves at the level of mind, the mind stops trying to make a sequence out of everything. Then you feel the other side of that, because natural reality doesn't have that sequence. It doesn't live in the past, and then it doesn't move from the past into the present and then into the future. That's not how it is. That's not experienced that way. And so instead of that sequencing or that doership, I guess you could call it, what's experienced is spontaneity. And spontaneity, again, feels like maybe a net loss when compared to predictability and doership, but it's a massive gain when you can actually viscerally experience it. It's what we really always wanted. It's what we remember from childhood, being a child and being spontaneous. You were playing, but you didn't know you were playing. You were just engaged in the world. You were experiencing the flowers, or a boat in the bathtub, bloop, 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 playing with your toy boat, or whatever, your babies, whatever you were doing, but you weren't thinking, oh, I'm here playing. How long have I been playing before mom calls me and then I have to stop? And then, gosh, I don't want to stop playing because it's fun to play. But then well, maybe I should plan later what I do after I play so that I don't feel like I'm losing something when I stop playing. Like they don't think in that complex of ways, right? They're just immersed in the moment. It's just textures and sensations and movement and feeling. And the important point is spontaneity. The child doesn't know what they're doing and why they're doing it, but that unknowing, that innocence, is what makes it so enjoyable. And it helps that clicking in to the natural movement and the natural flow of conditions. I don't know if it helps it, but that's what it is. And to be in that flow, in that natural flow, you just know it. There's no way to talk about why you know it, but you know it. It's clear. You can almost say like there's a right way to move and a not right way to move, or there's a way to move naturally and a way not to move naturally. But to divide it up that way sounds almost moralistic or something, but it has that feeling to it. It's like something just clicks and the voice speaks and the body moves and the dog, pets and the walking walks, and it's simple and it's immersive and it's not predictable. And there's not a sense of an agent trying to control everything but always afraid it's going to lose control all the time. It's just spontaneity, natural arising spontaneity as one sound. And the sound then becomes the teacher of spontaneity. It becomes the teacher of depth. It becomes the teacher of interconnection. It's just that sound, just this sound, just the sound in the ears right now. And then subtract the ears and subtract the body and subtract any label you have about what a sound is, but the sound still remains. And it's not solid. It's not an image. It's not a way. It's not a certain way. It's too free for that. It's too full, too immersive. And there's a third aspect that I want to kind of point to in this way. And and these all kind of relate to one another, I think. Is this making sense, or am I not making any sense at all? Okay, you can kind of resonate with it. Okay. Because if I'm not, just stop me and I'll talk about something else. The third aspect I would say this flows into, that's a kind of comparative aspect between the world of me inside a mind and a body operating in a world that I'm in opposition to and trying to manage that world. The difference between that and the experience of one sound is the whole universe. It's all of existence, just that. And that makes your whole life and death pale in comparison somehow. It's a minuscule movement in this huge, infinite dance of existence, operating as a sound. So the difference between this third aspect can point to that as well. And I'll talk about it in a subtractive way as well. And that is, when you're able, I think, to experience without that solidity, without that slice of reality and taking that as an image and saying this is how it is, but instead just letting reality show its infinite variety and splendor of movement, fluctuation, etc. And the sense of a doer or an agent running this show, predicting the next action and the next action, and then making itself believe it's in control of those. When that dissolves and it's that variety, that depth, and then the spontaneity comes online, then I think the third aspect that I'm going to point to becomes clearer. This might come later, maybe, but the weird thing is, it's in a sense it's a small thing, and I'm going to explain why that is. But the subtlety of it is its power. It's a simultaneously and paradoxically a very small shift, but it's in a sense the biggest shift with all of this. And that is, the mind values, the thought system values things that are gross, things that are large and obvious, things that are, it's kind of like solid, but more like clear as a mental construct, obvious and clear and solid as a mental construct. Something I can talk about with somebody else for a long time, and we both have a very solid idea of what we're talking about, right? An object that has a purpose maybe or something, and you and I can talk about that, and we can talk about it for 2 hours, and we both kind of feel like we're not really talking in an authentic way, but we're solidifying this idea about a certain subject with each other, right? That's like mind stuff. It's whatever the opposite of subtle is, I guess I would say. So the word gross comes to mind. But when we realize that that's again the value system of thoughts, the value system of the mind, we are suddenly opened to this subtlety. I don't have another word for this. It's extremely subtle. The extreme subtlety of it is what becomes so incredibly alive. And it's, in a very paradoxical way, it starts to cement this experience of non-dual into the spontaneity and flow of momentary reality. These really strange terms come into play, like solid emptiness or a mountain of emptiness. But the way you get to that mountain, the way you climb that mountain, is through subtlety. Through from an emotional standpoint, it's surrender, or vulnerability, maybe even helplessness. But this goes beyond emotion. It goes beyond the emotion body. It goes beyond the physical body. Actually, it does. This subtlety, I could almost call it a vibration. I think Ishwar would call it a vibration. It goes beyond. If you follow this vibration, and you're not following it out there somewhere, and you're not even following it in here somewhere. You're following it maybe into the phenomenon, into the sounds, into the sensations. But if you're able to follow that vibration, and the formula for following it is to find, but to honor that contact point between absolute dissolution, nothingness, awareness maybe, and vivid texture, the texture of sound, the texture of sensation. You find that point where those come in contact. They're like an alive dance of nothing and everything. And you follow that in and through the senses, and in and through the existence of the body, and in and through consciousness. And then you can follow that through all of it simultaneously even, but you don't have a map for that. There's no map for this. This has to be surrendered to or participated in open-heartedly, let's say. And that will clarify this subtlety that I'm talking about. This, maybe call it a vibration, but it's not like a feeling of vibration exactly. Well, it can be, but if it is, it's a vibration in all directions and all levels of existence simultaneously, or the vibration of aliveness in the cells of the body. But a willingness to just allow that subtlety to infuse everything, the subtlety of one sound to infuse all of experience, not your experience, because the moment it's your experience, you're thinking about it. I mean the experience, like what is pure experience without me in it? What is sound without the ear? What is seeing without the eye? What is seeing without the one who's seeing? It's just that, right? It's just that. What is the one sound without anything recording it or labeling it or collecting it to describe? Like, what is that? It's alive now. It has to stay with that movement, that flow here, now. And in that flow, there's a giving up constantly. There's a letting go, a surrender, a dissolving that just continues and continues and continues. And it dissolves into itself. And it becomes more and more subtle that way. But the texture of aliveness doesn't go away. That's strange thing. It just becomes more intimate. But you're not collecting that. You're not collecting the intimacy for yourself. It's not like, oh, this feels good to me. It's not good or bad. There's no one it's happening to. It's just happening. It's pure happeningness, pure aliveness, pure vibrancy and radiance. And that, again, there's that coupling of that, the radiance and vibrancy, and the signature of subtlety and the signature of dissolution and nothingness. And it's kind of like the more you penetrate one, the more you penetrate the other. So that's the talk I wanted to give about the train whistle. And then the other thing that's sort of related to that, as I mentioned at the beginning, was I was talking to Michael about focusing earlier, and it's a psychological strategy technique that was discovered by a certain psychologist a few decades ago. And it's extremely simple, but I think this is a good thing to talk about in relation to what I just mentioned, because if there's a way to get to that, if there's a practical means for the human, it's through direct contact with what's happening inside. And that's the emotions, the beliefs, the feelings, the sensations. And I think focusing, not really as a described technique, but just as a natural movement that I find comes online when things become clear enough. You just find that that's what there is to do. It makes sense and it's natural. I think that's probably about as efficient a way you're going to find to do this. And the simplest way to state it is that when we reference, I'll put it simply from the standpoint of the way this psychologist described it. He described it in therapy sessions, or he observed it in therapy sessions. They wanted to do a study to see which kinds of therapies work best for people, et cetera. And I think at some point they realized for some reason, some people don't really respond to therapy very well, and other people seem to respond pretty well or very well. And of course, it makes total sense to ask yourself, well, what's the difference? Let's look and see if we can figure out the difference. So they observed therapy sessions, like they videotaped and observed numerous therapy sessions, hundreds, I think, maybe thousands, different types of therapists, different types of therapy, different types of patients, different demographics, et cetera, and different diagnoses. And they, after like collating the data and analyzing what was the difference and which attributes seemed to predict it working versus not working. I may understand this in a pretty simplistic way, but I have read a little bit on it. But basically what they found was one thing, and that is something, not that the therapist was doing, something that the patient was doing. And furthermore, it was so simple, this act that the person would either be doing or not doing to predict the success of therapy. It was so simple that you could teach somebody who really didn't know much about therapy, or maybe nothing about therapy, like an undergrad psych student. You could teach them to look for it in the videos, and they can pick it out almost right away. And then even furthermore, you could have this person who doesn't know anything about therapy pick out this characteristic of the person that's very predictive without even listening to the talk, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, right? Because therapy's talk, isn't it? So they could turn the volume down on the videos, and an undergrad student who didn't know about therapy, they just knew some psychology theory, they could watch the videos and they could accurately predict which patients would get better and which wouldn't, just because they were taught this one thing to look for. So that's the introduction. I think it's fascinating. Did I get that reasonably close, Michael, from what you read? Yeah, I think that's pretty much how it played out. Anyway, so, and again, it wasn't what the therapists were doing. It wasn't the type of therapy that mattered. I'm sure it affects it somehow, but this was the highly predictive characteristic. And all it was something very simple. The gist of it was, when the therapist would ask a question the patient, of the client or whatever, or have them tell a story about their life or whatever. The ones that had this characteristic, they would pause and often noticeably turn their eyes downward as if they're looking into their body to find the answer. They would stop and wait and pause and then answer. Okay? When they did that, they had a very high chance, or reasonably high chance, of having success with therapy. If they didn't do it, no matter how long they had therapy, years and years and years, it would like not take. It wouldn't work. If it's like, well, why do you do this? Well, I do this because of blah, 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 blah. And then, well, tell me about this. And they have a ready answer, you know, like just, they're just so in the mind narrative, they can't break out of that at all, ever. That person, for whatever reason, and this isn't a judgment on that person, it's just saying, when you do that, when you have that approach to communication, when you have that, I guess, tendency that can be observed in communication, for whatever reason, therapy doesn't work for you. It just doesn't work. Now, when I read this, I actually found this because I was curious about this moving attention into the body, because I noticed how well it works. And I was actually, I think, looking on the internet for anyone who had noticed it, or psychologists or anything. And I found, this is how I found this. And then I was amazed, because I'm like, well, that's exactly how it is. Like, what I find that I'm doing one way or another is trying to get people to put attention in their body, right? Into the senses, one way or another. That's usually what I'm doing when I'm working one-on-one, especially when it's emotion stuff, or even belief stuff. This is very helpful for. So I find it to be exactly true. And I think as realization clarifies, you just find the tendency to do that a lot. Like if things are confusing, if you're feeling intense emotions, if you've been in an argument, if you're having a difficult time with someone at work, if you're just whatever, you generally have a tendency to just stop, to disengage from whatever, people, stuff, and just sit there. And maybe you'll meditate, maybe you'll do some inquiry work, but ultimately the tendency becomes more and more for your attention to just go right into the physical sensations. And that's it, nothing more. No healing, not inner, child work necessarily, although that stuff can be helpful. All this stuff can come into play. It becomes a very simple act of direct feeling, direct experience of body sensation. And so when I end up working with people around emotions and working with myself around emotions, this is how I tend to direct the conversation, to just facilitate someone to recognize the value and power of doing that. But what's really interesting about this is what Michael and I were talking about this morning, is it's amazing how far things can go and how long you can go in life and how much work you can do and still not realize you're not really fully doing this and think you are. It is on a spectrum, I think. Just being willing to touch in, being willing to stop the thought process for a minute and just go, okay, what am I feeling? What is an emotion? Where's the sensation in the body? What's going on? And just let your attention drop into it. Just being willing to do that for just a microsecond, that's a step. That's good. It's a good thing. To know it's valuable to actually try to do that and not just keep thinking as if you're going to solve the problem, right? That's like on the beginning of that spectrum. And then over time, we start to recognize, okay, it's good to give myself time to do this, whether that's meditation time, whether it's I'm just not feeling great, I'm going to lay in bed today for more time than I normally would, or I'm going to cancel something and just sit. I'm not going to I'm not going to distract myself right now because something intense is going on and I want to just feel it, right? Just giving ourselves permission to do this from time to time, recognizing that this is the next step on the spectrum, maybe recognizing that important communications come through this way. Not communications at the level of the thought system of, oh, I've analyzed the problem and now I know the solution. That has its value in life, but this is a different kind of communication. We start to recognize, oh, a different kind of communication can come through just feeling, whether it's feeling a certain emotion or the emotional cascade or even a block or a contraction, just allowing some attention to rest there. We start to mature that in this way that we recognize that's actually really important. it's not valued in the way most people like communicate with one another. Some for sure, but a lot of times what's valued is more distractions, right? More doing, more, oh, you're not feeling good, you're feeling depressed, okay, you need to get up and do something. Go out and start an activity, start a hobby, exercise, right? This is the kind of advice we get. When you start to recognize this, you go, oh, that's completely wrong advice. The advice isn't, you can't handle it, don't sit there and feel it. It's actually the number one thing you should probably do is sit there and feel it, no matter how confusing it is, or unhealed it feels, or no matter what it seems to mean about the rest of your life. It's okay just to feel that, to feel the confusion, to feel the distortions, to feel the contractions, depression, whatever is there to feel, just feel it. It's okay. And as we move towards that, it's just a little bit more maturity and recognizing that disengaging from the thought system, the narrative, the drama, disengaging from distractions, whether it's, internet distractions, phone distractions, hobby distractions, exercise distractions, eating there's a million types of distractions. And when you're doing something naturally and spontaneously, and when you're doing it to distract yourself generally, right? Most of us know. You can tell the difference. So realizing all of those things can kind of take a second seat sometimes to this feeling that's moving through, that, wow, I've been actually avoiding this a lot of my life. That's another sort of step in maturity in this process. And then it can move toward an inquiry into what is the actual nature of this feeling. How am I feeling it? How am I processing it? Recognizing that there's a complexity to it is maybe, I'm making steps out of this, but I don't know if it really has steps, but it seems to go along this path. The next part is actually becoming even more interested in this, whatever this is moving through us, in the sense that we want to know, okay, well, what's it made out of? What are its components? Like recognizing there's actually a sensation here for sure, but if it was just a sensation, what's keeping me from feeling that? Why do I keep running from it? Why do I keep bouncing into my head? Why have I been avoiding this feeling in my chest like my whole entire life? That doesn't even make sense, and yet I have been, and I can still feel myself trying to do it. What's that about, right? So then we become interested, okay, well, what's the whole cascade involved in this sensation, emotion, and resistance pattern, and then narrative, right? They all go together. They're like a cascade of avoidance in a way. So we become interested in what are the components of that, like genuinely interested in an innocent way. Like, I actually don't know. I don't really know what an emotion is. I don't really know what a sensation really is. And I don't know if I ever really feel them completely. I don't know why I think about other things that are completely unrelated when I start to feel this. How are these things related? What are the beliefs tying it together, right? So when we get to this place, then we have an opportunity to investigate the different aspects, right? The sensation, it is simple. It is simple. Put your attention in the sensation. Allow your attention to rest in the sensation. Allow attention to radiate from that sensation. There is only that sensation. If you can go there, that's it. You don't really need to do anything else, okay? But when we do that, and then we start noticing the other stuff happening, the distraction, the feelings, the contractions, then let's investigate those as well, okay? So one layer above that direct non-dual experience of physical sensation would be like an emotion tone, an emotion, right? Something like fear of sadness, fear of helplessness, fear of loss of control, shame, guilt, these things that stir really deep in the emotion body that we have a lot of avoidance patterns to not feel. That's kind of the next stage above that direct sense experience, that it's instinctually keeping us almost to like bob out of that, to distance ourselves a little bit. And then more of an emotional cascade of whatever, I'm feeling a lot of sadness, I'm feeling anger. And then of course the narratives that get intertwined with those feelings. And recognizing the relationship between these aspects, to recognize, because at first, when we're very mind identified, when we're really in the head, it really feels like, oh, I think of something and then I feel an emotion. People say this a lot, right? They'll be like, well, no, if I think of something, it makes me feel this way. So I try not to think about that. Like, that's identity completely in the thoughts. That actually believes the thought world is in control. I decide what I feel and what I don't feel, but that's la la land. That's not how it works. The emotion starts to come. And by the time you're even aware of the emotion, you're already 3 steps down the road in mind identification of all of the layers of identity you learned from 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, from people who taught you this to avoid those emotional cascades through becoming a person with whatever identities. Yeah. So by the time we even recognize the emotions coming, we're already 4 thoughts down the road, and it's very deceptively easy to believe oh no, I decided that emotion came by what I was thinking about or something like that. But I don't find that. The clearer this becomes, the more you realize underneath all of it is just energetic movement. It's the conditions of the environment, and it is non-dual. All phenomena are completely non-dual. There's no separation from anything, and it's all perfectly clear, moving spontaneously of its own volition. And there's nothing you could even say about it. There's nothing apart from it, noticing it. But the layer above that is the physical impulse of aliveness, and that is tied right into our defense mechanism of survival, right? That the physical aliveness of, oh my God, I'm in a physical body right now, and there's potential dangers to that, right? There's a finality that could occur, that it will occur, that life and death are of utmost importance to me as I experience myself as a body, right? So our survival instincts and all that stuff get turned on, and then the next layers of identity just add on top of them, but they're like emotion, the deep emotion tones, the survival instinct, the fear of abandonment, the fight or flight instincts, those really deep emotional structures. Those are the next sort of layer. And as the conditions move, and the most fundamental distortion of self perceives itself apart from those conditions and wants to control, to make itself feel better, to make itself survive in the way it perceives itself, that's where those movements of self, of avoidance, of trying to form a frame of reference, all those things, those impulses, those are very deeply rooted. That's where they form, like as it bubbles up, right? And then the next layer is emotion. And there's a lot of emotions tied to that stuff, of course. But again, years ago, we learned the mental processing that constructs ongoing identities to actually keep us from feeling those emotions. So instinctually, we know this stuff's happening at some level, but we're very distanced from it a lot of the time. And so by the time we even know what's going on, we're already in the thought system that's going, oh no, I'm in control of this. I know how to fix this. I know what to take to make myself feel better. I know this person caused it, and he said that, and she said this, and I know that's why it happened. And so I know what to do. I'm going to go exercise, and like whatever, all the thoughts that we have about being in control and what I need to do and where I'm going. Oh, I need this spiritual, technique for this situation. And here's when you do this kind of inquiry and that kind of inquiry. Like all that stuff is very up here in the mind. And that world can feel extremely real to anybody, but especially when we're triggered, when we're out of sorts, if we come in contact with something we haven't come in contact with, like illness, and we feel a more deeply rooted existential threat that we haven't come in contact with yet. Maybe theoretically we'd come in contact with the idea of death, but when you really come in contact with it, it's different, right? Those triggers are there, and that cascade bubbles up to the top and puts us up in our head. So as this maturity comes, now we learn to recognize the relationship of all of those areas. Specifically, the beliefs that keep our identity trying to operate and remain in thought instead of just dropping into the sensations, into the cascade of feeling. And so at some point we start to investigate, what are these beliefs? What beliefs do I have about myself right now? What beliefs do I have about all of the things that trigger humans? Relationships, abandonment, validation stuff, security, money, like all these things we have to actually go back through and see and feel underneath the beliefs, and then what are the emotions tied to them. And as we kind of give we give space and consciousness to each of these levels of experience, they start to untie themselves. They start to just untie from one another, and it feels different. So it's okay to have the thoughts and beliefs. They're just thoughts and they're just beliefs, right? And it's okay to have the emotions. They're just emotions. They're sensations, they're feelings, they're impressions. And then it's okay to have the feelings in the body, the sensations in the body, even the contracted sensations, the really subtle and sneaky resistance patterns. They're hard to see because they always hide by definition, but you can start to even perceive them. You can feel their signature when they're operating. You kind of know it, and you become interested in that. And as you recognize each aspect as its own life energy, as its own entity, the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs, the impressions, the resistance patterns, the avoidance patterns, and then the sensations, then they're each given an allowance to be what they are naturally. You can feel, if you feel an emotion as an emotion, and you recognize a thought as a thought, and a thought is just structured in consciousness, and you recognize what is consciousness, the infinite, unbound nature of consciousness, and you recognize what is actually an emotion, which is a perception sort of tied to a belief that's actually rooted in a set of physical experiences in the body. And then you recognize what are those sensations in the body? What actually are those? What is that sensation? That's when it's non-dual. That's the train whistle. And then you recognize, okay, I don't even have to have a preference on where attention is. I don't have to say, well, it's better to be in the pure experience than in the emotion, than in the thoughts or whatever. Okay, wherever attention is, that's where it is. It's fine. That's where you need to see things. That's where we need to honor the life form at the level of identity that's operating in that moment, right? And then the focusing, the attention dropping right into the sensation happens totally naturally, is what I find. It just becomes a natural movement because, as I described before, with the whole cascade of experience, it's the root of that experience, right? The momentary, spontaneous, non-solid, infinitely deep phenomena. Those are the foundation of reality, the foundation of physical experience of reality, if there is one. It's not really a foundation, it's just, that's by far the most real, but you don't get there by like wanting that to be your primary experience. You have to recognize all of the layers that have habituated us to not remain in contact with it. Let's just say that. People say things like the mind just becomes quiet when it recognizes it doesn't have anything to do anymore. When the mind, when the thought system realizes it's not in charge of all this and it doesn't have to be, then it can just rest, you know. And that happens to some people. They just rest in consciousness like for the rest of their life, you know, as their spiritual practice. They can just go into unbound consciousness and just meditate there, you know, when they want to meditate, and it's very peaceful. Things will take care of themselves along these lines, but it's just a matter of being willing to recognize everything as what it is. Recognize a sensation as a sensation, a thought as a thought, a feeling as a feeling. And recognize it, and then allow its nature, and know what it feels like to have a pure thought that dissolves into consciousness, to come into contact with consciousness, and know what it feels like to feel the feeling as it moves through the body, and emote that feeling if that's how you move, to let the body respond naturally to it, whether it's laughter, crying, shaking, tightness, relaxation, whatever. Recognizing that the body has a physiologic response to the environment, and allowing all of that in the way that feels. And then underneath all of it, then that pure experience just starts to shine forth. You don't kind of get to it by thinking about it, the map of it. You gotta, in my opinion, you really gotta look at what's above it. Look at the layers above it and recognize them for what they are, and then they kind of coalesce into it. It's more like that. That's all I got. but there's a couple of books. There are a couple of books on focusing. Michael, who's the author of them?
So the one that the one that I really like, it's The Power of Focusing. That's what it's called. It's by Carol something Carol N. Weiser or something like
Power of
that.
Focusing.
Yeah, she was a student of that guy Eugene Genlin or something, and she was a linguist. And she developed it really well and kind of refined the language that's used. So it's a really short book. It's only like 100 pages. It's really practical.
Nice.
Yeah.
About focusing, just in general, not the specifics, because I haven't read that book. But I encountered a lot of stuff similar to that when I first got involved with spirituality, because it was mainly to like heal myself from depression and this kind of thing. So it was like, okay, you need to actually be aware of your body instead of just thinking about it. And I did a lot of that. I thought I was doing that. Like my whole practice actually was oriented towards feeling into my body, focusing on my body. And what I've realized recently is there's a massive, massive difference between being aware of your body from your head, like looking down into your body, and this whole different experience of it's like the mind sinks into the body and is aware of the body from within the body rather than some kind of detached observer position. And I've heard people make this distinction, and I really didn't understand it. Like Judith Blackstone is a non-duality author that talks about embodied non-duality and really hammers about this distinction. And it was like, that makes sense, but I still couldn't get it myself. And now with the Taoist stuff, I've been really getting into the really good teacher who teaches in a lot of detail. He explained it in a way finally that I got it. And he said, really, the ability to do that, to actually have the mind sink into the body, is really a function of how soft the tissues are. So if all of your tissues in your like head and jaw and neck and shoulders and everything are just really tight, your mind just will not be able to sink into your body in that way. It just can't. I mean, maybe like a trickle, but not in this way that's required to really get the deeper work done. So, and ever since I understood that and have been trying to really find ways to relax the soft tissues, especially, Alma, I mean by soft tissues, things other than muscles. So, which interestingly, you can learn to relax consciously. So you're going to have connective tissue, just the tightness of blood vessels, ligaments, fascia, this kind of thing. And any kind of organs also. So, well, soft tissues, I'm sorry, I'm responding to Alma's text chats if it's confusing anyone. The soft tissues are a thing, but they can become harder or softer. So soften the soft tissues is what I'm saying specifically. Yeah, and so that's what's been going on for me. And Angelo, you were showing me something in a dream recently that's related to this. So, and it's all starting to click now. So I would actually just be curious to like turn it over to you and your reflections on these different kinds of awareness and your experience of them and any thoughts you have. I'd be really curious to hear.
So this is going back to, and there's nothing wrong with it, but this is going back to the like describing it in a positive way instead of a negative way, like an additive instead of subtractive way. But as you described, like the mind going down into the body, I understand the tradition and context from which that comes. Like, in Zen and Buddhism, they use the big M mind and stuff. But to me, mind just seems, it's just so, it has such a strong connotation for thought that to me, even saying it's the mind that goes into the body is still kind of championing mind somehow. What it experientially is like, it feels like the body's just radiating sensation. That's what it feels like. It feels like sensation is radiating, but not, I say the body just because that's kind of like the directionality of it. But it's not like the mind that's paying attention to the body like comes down into the body that in my experience. It's like the mind is still kind of operating and making sounds, but the glow of aliveness just gets more and more and more. But it's not, the thing is, I'm doing it like it's coming out of a body, but it's not. It's the whole environment doing it. It's like, it's kind of radiating in all directions, but I guess there's no sense of a personal center, but there's a sense of a local environmental effect, I guess. But the weird thing is that locality it suggests that there's another place, but the feeling of that radiance is that there is no other place. That's that maximum exertion experience. And so it's like, even as I'm talking, or like making concepts and words, the reference is still fully here, or in the sensations, the reference of awareness. Let me say that. It's like, okay, when the thought system is kind of operating, it feels like it's like a spotlight, and it's shining on things and trying to manage this. It's like, oh, I can look in the body, I can look out there. But that whole way of experiencing is dualistic. Instead of a spotlight looking down on things or experiencing things, it's not like that spotlight goes into the body and now it's in the body. It's more like everything is a spotlight shining outward from everything, from its own experience of aliveness. Like the color is radiating aliveness coloring, self-aware color, self-aware visual reality, self-aware sensory experience, just doing what it does, just experiencing, feeling. It's like feeling feels, sound radiating soundness only into itself. There's not even anywhere for it to radiate. It kind of radiates into like sound radiates into the color field, radiates into the sensation field. John Tan said it's bubble-like. It's kind of like that. That's the one way of saying it for sure. But again, that's the mind's making a map of it. But it is sort of like that. It's like, there is only this. There is only sound. There is only sensation. But that sensation, it's not in time. It's not coming and not going. It's not arising. It's not disappearing. It's not of birth and death. And also, it's not in space. That's far harder to make a mental map of than not in time. It's just, you can't, because we're such visual people, we visualize humans are such visual creatures. We visualize a three-dimensional world. That's the way the mind puts it together. But the physical experience of it is not in 3 dimensions. It's in no dimensions. Like here is everywhere. That's that feeling, that subtlety that I was talking about earlier, that as that comes online, that feeling of here everywhere, center everywhere, or no center, or more like everywhere here. That's the intimacy, the opposite of FOMO. There's nothing to miss out on because there's nothing out there. There's nothing else. And there's a knowing that every phenomenon experiences itself that way, radically intimate. But the mind will make stories about how it gave itself to the body or something like it. I can see how that will happen too. And it doesn't matter if it does that, it's fine. But it's not really like that. There's never been a mind apart from a body. There's consciousness is also intermixed with all of this. Consciousness meaning the place where we think. The place where we think we're at, living a life and making decisions and trying to wake up and all that. That place of self, of consciousness, that is also intermixed with all of this. But it has a little bit different quality maybe than the 5 sense gates, in that it's reflective in nature. It's a little more ephemeral, a little more like ghost-like almost. If I pull it apart, but it can't be pulled apart either. So that's a paradox. This is wrought with paradoxes. You have to be really comfortable with paradox to really let this dissolve deep, deep, deep. There's just no way otherwise. It's all paradoxical. And that paradoxical nature is also part of the subtlety of it. It's beautiful. Yeah. Nothing seems so unimportant to the mind. I can't do anything with that. Or indeterminacy seems like it's completely useless to our thought system. And yet everything is infused with indeterminacy. It is indeterminacy. With all that said, there's of course a value to, and you can answer that question if you want to, but there's a value to actual physical relaxation. Of course there is. There's a value to recognizing, oh my gosh, I have tension here, here. I've been holding my jaw tight for 19 years, and there's just noticing that stuff is a huge step too, and just be willing to physically relax it. And sometimes you can energetically, although I wouldn't tell people to force it, you can energetically feel the energy sometimes actually dissolve down into the body. You can feel it as it dissipates into the body or dissipates even in the environment. John Tan is a huge fan of like yoga and energy work for the body, and I can't disagree. I don't really do it myself, but I think it's probably really valuable. Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, energy practices in the body, because a lot of this does come down to, as you know, through Taoism, that it comes down to energy channels being blocked and things like that. But these are so subtle that I think it's really hard to approach them from an intellectual standpoint. But if you can find a way to energetically approach them directly through techniques, practices that are developed over hundreds and whatever thousands of years, then that's great. But once the real, true Maha nature of phenomenon is clear, is known, is that radiance, there's nothing that can be said about it. It's not in time and it's not in space. It's not coming from somewhere. It's not going towards somewhere. There's no one for whom it's occurring. It's not even occurring. It's too real to even be of the nature of occurrence. It's not in the present because there's no past and future for there to be subtracted out to make presence. It's so real, it doesn't have any boundaries in time or space at all. And part of you just knows you could just sit there for the rest of your life and it wouldn't even matter. Doesn't matter at all. Eckhart Tolle said, I sat on a park bench for 2 years or whatever. Like, I totally get that. Now, your karma may not determine that's what's going to happen, but it's that kind of thing. I say things like completion, but it's natural completion. It's completion that doesn't need to be completed. It's already that way. It's always been that way. It could never be other than holistically, thoroughly, clearly complete. There's no way to have lack here. You need self and other to have lack. You need one versus the other. You need comparison and distance and space and time, and none of that exists here. It's just fluidly, meaningfully nothing, everything. Again, paradox, but yeah. I can't tell if it's in the body, out the body, outside, inside. There's no concern for that, because there seem to be mental designations, their descriptions, inside, outside, all that. Body, no body, me, you, humans, non-humans, not inanimate objects, people, animals. Like these are all conceptual designations and are not experienced directly in the non-dual field, truly. And it's not a field. No field.
My first teacher, when I first started meditating, was really into that focusing book. So like I was doing Vipassana and all this very like separative kind of observing sensation stuff, and he got me to read that book, and it created all these really weird, cool bliss states for a few months. And then I forgot about it for like 10 years or so. And I recently just was rereading both that one and The Power of Focusing. And I realized how much my personality had like hijacked the instructions in the meantime. And so now, like if I have like agitation or like heat in my solar plexus, the instruction I've been giving to myself is to like go as laser focused into my solar plexus as possible, which does the exact opposite of relaxing it and letting it move. And I was rereading the focusing book and appreciating like how fucking smart he is and how he articulates, because he talks about having like a mass of the problem or the sensation or whatever, and he talks about referring to it as all that. Like there's a sense of there's all that out there, and it's kind of out there. It's not like eating you. It's just kind of there, and you're looking at it, and then you can kind of feel the allness of it, which is pretty much the exact opposite of what I was doing. And so I've been playing with that for the last few days. So I like that you guys are talking about it here. It's just funny to notice how the system will hijack an instruction that could actually be useful in a way that maintains exactly what it's been doing the whole time.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with everything you just said, and it's very accurate and reproducible. I'll make a simple statement. The mind, the thought system is born of the belief in separation. Okay, so it's going to get things wrong almost all the time. It's just how it is. It gets things totally backwards. It's a reflection. So you're in the mirror. You're not actually in the mirror, but you're looking in a mirror trying to figure out how to get out of the mirror. That will never happen, right? It's like why you struggle with the mind. The struggle never ends. You believe one thought, and then you're stuck in there, right? It's like you're in the house of mirrors. You can't get out. So the mind will always take any of these descriptions, these observations that come from authentic clarity, realization, observation, whatever. It'll always take them and turn them into something they're not. It has the tendency to do that. And that's what Brina just said very clearly. And I know that feeling very well. My Zen teacher used to say, he said once, he said, I used to look at a flower and try to make myself merge with the flower. And he said it was really, really uncomfortable. Like it really frustrated me. And as he was saying this, like people in the audience laughed, and he goes, it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at all. It might be funny now, but it sucked. It was really uncomfortable. And what I finally realized is you just have to learn to be calm through and through, quiet through and through, and then the colors will replace you. That's a very good way of saying it. I wanted to point it to it one other way, is that, again, in a sense, we have to abandon the idea of I'm the one directing my attention. Maybe not abandon it, but temper it with a different approach. And that is, I often say, like in my guided meditations and stuff, I'll just say, let your attention move to the body, but let the body show you where it wants to move your attention. Like, just regard the body right now. Where's your attention called? What sensations come to your attention right away? Is it your toes, your gut, your face, your jaw? That's fine. That's where your attention wants to go. That's letting the sensations take the lead, instead of I'm directing my attention here, 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 which can just continue to underscore the belief that I need to be in control of my attention all the time or whatever. Now, again, there's a paradox to that too. By directing attention in these various ways, especially through inquiry, through self-inquiry, it can be like Ramana Maharishi said, the stick is used to stir the fire, but the stick's going to get burned up in that fire. That's how inquiry is. It feels so uncomfortable sometimes to do it, or a lot of times, and yet by doing it, that's the only way you see. By really searching for a self again and again and again and again, a lot of times that's how you see there's no self. Not for everybody, but that's how it works for a lot of people. And of course, the searching is frustrating as hell. Of course it is. And then all of a sudden, that you can't believe your way into that, but you can exhaust all of your faculties trying to find something and not find it. And then boom, everything just completely clarifies, right? So this can happen a lot of different ways, but tempering the idea that I'm the practicer, I'm the one directing attention, I'm the one choosing the technique and moving the energy and all that. There's nothing wrong with any of that. There's a place for all of it. But temper it with the other side that's like, okay, where's my attention naturally called right now? Sound? Sensation? Is there something here? Is there something here? Like and then once your attention's called there, recognize, okay, maybe I didn't put my attention there. I didn't put it like a beam or a spotlight there, did I? No, it just appeared there. And then you can either just notice that and then start noticing, oh wow, well, where else does that isness just come alive in the environment? Wherever it is, just let it start lighting up. You can do that, or you can ask, so attention's it seems to just be emanating from that. So you can even ask, well, what is attention? And look directly at attention. Don't think about it, but ask, well, what is attention then? If it seems to just be coming directly from that sensation, what is attention? And then put your attention in it, or let it show you, right? What is sensation? And then just that sensation. You can inquire. My point is, you can inquire, or if you can just rest with it and just continue to let that openness coalesce into a whole environment of feeling or phenomenal experiencing, then let it do that. Or you can, gently inquire when you recognize, oh, wow, that sensation just is what it is. It just, you could say it pulled my attention there because I don't have a better way of saying it. But there's no one directing that attention. And there actually never is. It's habituated. It's just the thing that's habituated into the mind most of the time. It's habituated into the thoughts. And then it'll drop down into a sensation for a moment, but it shoots back up into thoughts, and the thought goes, oh, I did that. I felt that. You didn't feel that. The thought didn't feel. A reflection can't feel what it's a reflection of. A picture, a Polaroid picture can't know that which it's a picture of, but the mind takes credit for it. Oh, I did that. I felt that. I moved my attention there, right? So the attention, my point is the attention isn't something anyone's directing, although it sure feels like it for a long time, but it feels like it's habituated to move into certain places, but 90 whatever percent of the time, especially when the default mode network is going, when we're not engaged in a task, it's directed right into thought. And the thought's going, okay, what technique should I do? I want to feel this, I'm going to feel that. Okay, I'll do this technique. And then it moves its attention to a sensation. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I felt that sensation. And this was like that. And I remember someone saying this about the sensation. Okay, I'll try that again. And right, thoughts. It's taking credit for all this shit, but the sensation is just the sensation. It didn't do any of that. It's not the sensation's fault. So don't take a reflection to be the actual. I could summarize the whole thing by saying that. Never take a reflection, a thought, map, belief, image. Never take that to be the actual, because it isn't. Never is, never will be, never can be. But the actual is here, 100%, always. So there's a million points of inquiry. What is the actual? What is an actual sound without thinking about it, hearing it, analyzing it? What is it? It's just that. What is a sensation? Without reflecting on it, believing I'm moving attention to it, labeling it, or having a mental image of where the sensation is. Now what is it? And you can keep doing that. This kind of inquiry. It can go on and on and on until the sensations just start to show you what's really happening. That no one's ever felt anything. There's only feeling. No one's ever actually gone out and felt something. It doesn't work that way. That's just a reflection. The feeling, it just is. No one's ever heard a sound. You've just seen the reflection of thought saying, I heard a sound. Sound hears. Thoughts don't hear. They reflect. And a person is a collection of thoughts, really, ultimately. A sense of self. It just it radiates all the time. The teaching is radiating constantly through you, to you, at you, in your face. But it doesn't speak the language of thought. Yeah, when I say like when I say like the trees are your teacher, the sky is your teacher, the sound is your teacher, I'm not being like mystical. I'm being literal. That teaching is way beyond the best map you've ever read of dependent origination. I mean, literally, that is true. Maps can be, to read a map of something's fine. To read someone else's experience of that sound, that's fine. It can be helpful if you're not experiencing the sound in the real way, right? If that sound's not clear, then reading someone else's map is fine, which is called spirituality. Best of it, right? The best of it, though, is still not nearly as good a teacher as the actual sound, of course. That's the great relaxation. That's the freedom of realization. That's what liberation is. You're liberated from spirituality. Doesn't mean there's nothing that can clarify beyond that, beyond liberation, beyond no self-realization. Doesn't mean nothing can clarify beyond that, because there is things that there's a clarification that goes beyond that. In fact, it accelerates, but there's no one that's doing it, and there's no map for how that plays out. It's reality waking itself up more and more and more. Everything becomes approached from a place of spontaneity and relaxation and letting go. That's natural, instead of approach it from a place of the spiritual person seeking to whatever. As long as that's there, it's fine. It's fine that that's there. It's fine if there's some stickiness around that signature of a me on a spiritual path. It's fine. It doesn't matter. But beyond liberation, beyond what I would call liberation, which is not the beginning of something, it's the end of something. Realization is its own teacher. It just is. Isness, aliveness, is its own teacher. Clarifies itself. That's the beauty of this. Beyond beautiful. It's beyond. Gone, beyond. And everything is a gift then, like a true gift. It's one thing for you to have an awakening, but to find everything awakening up all the time, everything. It's just incredible. But it's not a good experience. It's not a bad. It's not the realm of like human emotional. It's not in the emotional value system of a human. So I'm careful not to make it sound like some really good state that and you never feel a bad state. It's not of states. And there still will be states. There'll still be emotional states in the human for sure, for a while, for a long time probably. But there'll be beliefs, there'll be contractions, but they don't matter because it's not that they don't matter. They don't define. They're not about a person, really. They're not something to get over to get to liberation or anything like that. It's a moot point. The seeking is a moot point. The need to have any condition at all, the need to even preserve the life of this body is a moot point at some point. And that can be scary, but it's also complete liberation. Yeah, good and bad, or like pleasurable and not pleasurable, are really a waste of time, because the moment there's that dichotomy is believed in, there's the unseen self to whom that applies, and that's what's uncomfortable. Good and bad aren't uncomfortable. Pleasure and pain aren't uncomfortable. It's the one who thinks that they're happening to, that's what's uncomfortable. And when that's not there, or rather whatever you thought it was just seemed to be a reflection of reality itself. So you could say, there's no real way to say it, but you could say it a lot of ways. You could say there's no self. You could say what I thought was a self is actually all of reality just enjoying itself. Maybe Ramana Maharishi would call it a big S self. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I think some people say it that way, and that's fine. That's just the way their minds put it together. But there's certainly nothing apart, and there's nothing that's there's nothing that's in control of this any more than were you in control when you were born? Were you in control when you came through the birth canal? Are you in control of the glucose level in your blood right at this moment? Do you ever know what it is? Do you know what your heart rate is? Like, you're not in control of this stuff. It's just happening. All of it's happening. You're not in control of the sounds that are washing over you right now. Of course, there's no one in control of that. It's all just happening, right? So, again, the absence of the one it all seems like it's happening to is the biggest relief. Because that one isn't what you think it is. It's resistance is what it is. It's opposition. It's resistance resisting itself and thinking it needs to continue to do that to survive. But there's nothing that needs to survive. This is beyond birth and death. Is not even of the realm of existence, non-existence. Can't prove it to you, but it's a great relaxation. Full relinquishment and full immersion. We get the reason I said earlier, like the mind gets things backwards so often. What it thinks it wants is actually what it's avoiding. It thinks it wants, intimacy, to feel merged. It thinks it wants that, but it's born of avoiding it. Because with that merging, that one isn't there anymore. Not that it ever was, though. Yeah, reflection just can never know the actual. And any way we can take ourselves to be is always a reflection. So there's just the actual. And you don't have to find the actual. It just finds you all the time. But it only speaks the language of immediacy. Sound and no sound. Color and no color. That's immediacy. Movement and stillness. Integration and disintegration. Teaches you through innocence. Throw out everything you know every moment. Be willing to let go of any need to learn from this, from life, from reality. Any need to hold on to it, collect anything from it. Relinquish that need, and then you kind of open to it. Sometimes it feels like it's taking your skin off, making you raw or overly exposed or wide open in a way that doesn't feel comfortable or something. Sometimes it feels like that, but the wide openness is like, it's kind of like the resonant frequency of non-dual in a way. It starts to pick it up. Like I said before, you can think you're directing your attention and that's fine, but there's also this other side where reality is just talking to itself as a phenomenon, as a sensation, as a sound. It's just talking, moving, fluxing, disappearing. And to participate in that, I guess. Such a bad word. It requires an openness of some kind. And that openness can come different ways, I guess. Can you practice it? Maybe. A lot of times you get exhausted of seeking, of trying to control everything. You get exhausted of that. And then the openness reveals sometimes in little subtle ways here and there. And you just learn to tune to it more and more and more. And other times it just blows. So it just blows up, completely. So, but it doesn't matter how it happens. There's no right or wrong way for that. Something on Facebook. Yeah. Yeah, you can post something on Facebook.
Angela, could I add something?
Yeah.
Because earlier you were talking about something that kind of resonated, and then I don't want to interrupt you, but related to focusing though, it's interesting to me how with focusing, it's like we were talking about yesterday. It's like with the dirt on the mirror. It's like using dirt against dirt. Like how thought is utilized to essentially bring about what you were just saying. But for me, it was so powerful because I never really learned how to be vulnerable or how to relate to feelings in that way. And I was always kind of biased against like using thought, because I thought I thought I shouldn't use thought, thought shouldn't be here. But with focusing, there's that language just brings about that shift. Just where if there's like a lot of resistance towards a feeling, just saying hello to that feeling, you can be here, just melts the self that's apart, that's resisting. And so it facilitates that shift, which then you can viscerally feel, oh, this is what acceptance feels like. Oh, this is okay. So it's just interesting to me how there's so many different ways to go about it. But for me, kind of having to start with where I was at and starting to use some of those techniques, then started to bring about more direct kind of experiences of that. So yeah, it's definitely really powerful stuff.
Yeah, so that's what he just mentioned is what we were actually talking about yesterday. That was the actual conversation of how, ultimately attention just in the sensation of the body is where this goes, but you have to operate at the level of identity that you're at. He and I were talking more from a teaching standpoint, I guess, but from a practice standpoint, absolutely. If identity is in the thought system, then use the thought system in a way that is skillful around this focusing, right? So self-parenting, I would call it like self-parenting, or honoring the emotion as an emotion, the sensation as a sensation. So if you feel an emotion, you can, if you're like, I have no idea what I'm feeling, or I don't know if I feel, or some people say I don't have any emotions at all, or whatever. You can just start asking, like, well, what am I feeling right now? In simple situations, like when you're by yourself and you're doing something on the internet and you're going to call somebody and you feel frustrated or whatever, something happens, you feel triggered or something, just go, okay, well, what am I feeling? And it might be subtle at first, like, oh, I'm feeling frustration. Okay, this is frustration. Or maybe I'm feeling confusion. And I don't like to feel confusion, so maybe I'm feeling like fear of confusion. So there's fear there. So you can start to feel, and then you go, well, where do I feel that? Alternatively, as Michael was pointing out, and I think this is very helpful, it's kind of like a self-parenting thing, or kind of talking to your internal child, right? Because we have internal family systems going on in here. We learned the internal self-talk largely from our families. You can talk to that child, that emotion. You can tell it it's okay to be here, right? If I feel anxiety, it's, just have a conversation with it. Just say, hey, I've been running from you for a long time. Like, I've been disallowing you, but you can be here right now. It's okay. Like, you have space right now. Stay as long as you need to, and just put your attention right on it, right? And this is skillful use of the thought system, because the thought system, like I said, it's born of a sense of separation. It's born of a belief that it's separate and it has to manage everything out there. So when you do this, you're kind of using it in a completely different way. You're using it for connection and acceptance instead of avoidance and separation. So just talk to it. Just say, you can be here. You can be like, resistance, I think you're here somewhere, but you kind of like to hide. I don't always see you. Like, I'll just keep the door open. And if you want to come in, you're welcome to come in here. Like, you have a right to be here. Totally, you have a right to be here. Of course, come on in. Fear, anger, you have a right to be here. Anger, of course you do. Like or you can even like really get to know them, right? Like say you haven't seen your child for whatever reason, you were estranged from your child, or you were estranged from your parent. You want to get to know them. Tell me what the world is like for you. Talk to anger. What does anger say? What does it have to say? What does rage have to say if it's here? And sometimes you'll ask that question and you're like, I'm drawing a blank, or your mind will go, oh, this is stupid. I don't get it. But if you kind of keep at it and you have that openness, that open heart, that accepting approach, then you will start to actually get emotionally articulate. You'll start to get, you'll notice the nuances of emotion. You'll know the difference between, like, I don't know, resentment and guilt, or the connection between restlessness and sadness, or whatever. You'll start to notice these, oh, wow, when I feel this, I don't want to feel that, so then I feel this. And then when I feel that, I go do this, right? I don't want to feel sadness, so then instead I start to feel restless, and I don't know why I'm restless, so and I don't like that confusion, so then I just go, get on the internet or something. But when you kind of go back through this and go, well, what am I feeling? What is that connected to? What does it feel like to feel frustration right now? Like, how does this body move when I feel frustration? Can I like let it just have the body for a moment? Can I feel, where is it in the body? How does the body respond to it? How do I respond to whatever it is? All of them: guilt, shame, resentment, fear, anger, discontent, irritability. And yeah, you have that conversation at the level of mind. It's fine. Use your mind wisely. It is a powerful tool, and it can be a very precise tool. And this is a smart way to use it. This is inquiry, really, ultimately, I think. Well, maybe not inquiry, but this and inquiry, in my opinion, are very skillful ways to use the mind. They're ways to use the mind that don't amp it up and get it revved up. It actually calms it and integrates it. So Jeff Foster is really good about talking about this stuff. His books talk about this kind of approach to emotion a lot. Riccardo has said in his book, just get in the habit of asking, what am I feeling right now? Oh, I feel a headache and I want to go take this. I'm like, okay, should I take this medicine or that medicine? Or I'm feeling a gut ache and I'm like, okay, what do I need? Do I need this pill or that pill? Or do I need to call my doctor? Like, you feel something in the body, right? And you go, okay, maybe I'll go do all that stuff. But first of all, what are the emotions around this? Oh my God, when my gut starts to hurt, when my head starts to hurt, I feel helpless. I feel afraid that it's something serious, or I feel afraid that it's never going to go away, right? I'm afraid of, what would it be like if it never went away? Well, I'd be helpless. I'm afraid of helplessness. What does it feel like to be helpless, right? So any situation gives us an opportunity to investigate in this way if we want to. So again, this is seeing an emotion as an emotion and giving it life, letting it be alive in this experience, saying you have a right to be here. And the beautiful thing about this is no one can do it for you, and you can't do it for anyone else, really. Maybe if you're in a circling group or you have a really close friend that you work with or something, then there's value to it. But the beauty of it, you could do it with yourself. It's your own parenting. It's your own self acceptance. And yeah, there are probably books to help point it out, or focusing and stuff like that. But ultimately, once you get the hang of like, oh, I know how to do that. Of course, I can look inside, find out what I'm feeling, clarify it, accept it, give it space, put my attention right with it, and just say, yeah, this is okay. This can be here. You can be here. You start to recognize that inner child, like you really do. You recognize the places at which you started to learn to abandon yourself as a child because everyone else does it. All adults do it, right, to some degree or another. And you come back in contact. And when you start to feel compassion towards yourself, that's when you really start feeling natural compassion towards others. It's just a natural, not a side effect, but it's the natural progression. But if you can't accept others, there's something you're not accepting about yourself, for sure, which of course is an opportunity when you feel judgmental or you feel pissed off at somebody, or you feel like, you know, that person at work is such a jerk. How can they be like that? And just go, okay, well, what is it about me? What do I feel when I think about that kind of activity or that action or that type of person? What am I really feeling? What is the emotion? You know, control, anger, whatever it is. Just feel into those places. And once you know what they are, or once you have started to identify them, start to identify them as the feeling itself, and then accept it. Give it, offer it acceptance, offer it space. Give it permission to come and go too. You know, tell it, you know, I'm not trying to heal you. Healing is really violent. There's so much talk about healing stuff. The negative emotions and healing, it's terrible. Like it really is. You don't need to heal something. It's part of you. It's energy. There's nothing that needs healed. Nothing wants to be healed. It just wants to be what it is. When you're a child, do you like it when your parents are always trying to fix you? You sense that you're a problem that needs to be fixed? No, and then that's what we do, is we learn to internalize that, and then when we grow up and we have uncomfortable places, then we want to heal them. That's the same thing. It's just violence. Instead, accept them, feel into them, give them life, let them be what they are, let them speak even. Let them speak through your apparatus, through your intellectual apparatus if they need to. Let them emote through your body. Let restlessness move the body for a while. Lay on the floor and wiggle, roll around, whatever. If it feels, you know, oh, this feels uncomfortable, I've been avoiding this. Okay, those are all the thoughts, you know. The emotion is restlessness, but it's been here so long. I know the emotion, but I don't know what to do with it. Okay, well, maybe let me just let restlessness actually physically take the body. Let it move through the body. Let me physically explore restlessness. You know, I think really good actors probably do this. They physically let that emotion, they let the emotion take their body. It's a surrender, and that's how you can see that they know how to really put forward that character that you completely believe, because they're not acting. They're not acting. They're actually feeling it, right? They're letting their body be taken by an emotional landscape.
Can I add something, Angela?
Of course.
So it's kind of relating to like what Tyler was saying with the softening the soft tissue, the joints and things like that, and then like with the emotion work. So for me, I played a lot with body movement stuff, the myofascial release, which is like deep tissue stuff. Anybody that knows me well knows I have more massages than anybody, but for me, I think what I learned from that is that a lot of trauma is stored in the body, in the muscles, in the joints. And like, I don't know if this is ultimately true, but this is like very intimate for me. And I think like for me, like yin yoga, which is like holding yoga poses for really long periods of time, or, massaging really deeply into the muscles. For me, that practice has been very valuable in getting in touch with emotions that seem to be blocked, or energies that seem to be blocked. Sometimes it's like, okay, I feel something, like my mind doesn't understand what emotion this is, and I feel kind of muddy in my body, so I don't even really know what emotion this is. And then it's helpful to like go and do these deep stretches, and then all of a sudden I'm laying there and I'm screaming of anger and pain, because I'm somehow getting in touch deeply with the trauma that is just stored just at like the deepest part of the body. And that's very valuable at bringing up things that need to be held, things that need to be welcomed. And and I do that practice, those type of practices all the time, which I find are very valuable, but I think it's endless. I think our bodies contract endlessly. I think life contracts endlessly. It's just how it is. And I don't think it's something that and this was hard for me to learn because I thought really I would heal. I thought I would use practices, and in 6 months I would heal. In a year from now I would heal. In years from now I would heal. But what I realized is I heal from the need to be healed. And it's like this intimacy with being relevant with what I feel in my body. If I have tight muscles, if I have emotions, if I have a lot of thoughts, whatever that is physically relevant in my experience with this radiant vastness, this just, it's like there's something that here that doesn't value a radical movement any more than this intimacy with the body right now directly. Like they're both equally penetrating each other and vibrant. And I find that like the energy practices, like, acupuncture and all these things are all very valuable at opening channels, welcoming emotions, helping me get in touch with things that are buried. But if I don't do any of that, I also see this picture like if none of that ever happens and I just sit and do absolutely nothing, there isn't really anything that's blocked too. And I don't think one is more important than the other. Like I can't believe the perspective of just sitting in absolute peace and silence and saying there's nothing blocked here. Everything is perfect, exactly radiant as it is, which it is. Like I definitely see that. But I can't bring myself to believe that any more than I believe this incredible humanness of body pain and exercise and that need in that way. So yeah, I don't know the point, but I think it's just really for me, I just kind of found a place where both are equally valuable and helpful in their own way. And yeah, it's like whether I'm here and my body's in pain, it's not any more alive. The vibration isn't it's not really dull in any way. Yet I can pinpoint a dullness in my shoulder blade.
I find what you said to be totally true. It's, I think it's hard for very intellectual people to get there a lot of times, but it's like, I like the dualistic energy even is really stored in the physicality, like in the tissues of the body. And probably that's why focusing, if you can really do it, is quite powerful, just as is any other energy work. And probably energy work becomes about as primary as you can get in this way. I was just going to mention for kinesthetic people, and I think, Rochelle, you're definitely kinesthetic in a lot of ways, especially around this stuff. But people who are really kinesthetic, it's interesting because a lot of times they don't, like, they can't really meditate very well because they need to move their body all the time. They're like, I can't just sit still, I want to move, but their realization can be through movement. And because they really understand the body, they understand, like what you just said would be completely music to their ears to hear that. But a lot of people don't really move that way and don't completely understand that because they're so distanced from the physicality of their body. But this is deep stuff. This is the root of all emotion is in the physicality. It's really stored there. And I think even physiologically, the way the nervous system is wired. Another way of saying it is, mass is basically energy in a very, very compressed, condensed form. So the cells of the body, the physicality of the body actually holds that those energies. And yeah, anything you can do to come in contact with that, or I loved the way you described just holding a pose until the emotion comes. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I feel more lately with our little 3 or 5 day retreats. I feel like I used to really, really love just sitting in silence, and I had no problem. Like my body was not antsy. I didn't want to move. But now more so, I want to move. Like I want to stretch. I want to dance. My body wants to move.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning that meditation in that way. I'm like, well, it's a practice. It's feeling, but I also notice like feeling so intimate with every little thing. Like my, the little twitch we get in our eye, right? We have like one eye that's like this little twitch thing. Like I'll be going through my busy day, and then all of a sudden I'm getting this little twitch in my eye, and it's like everything is still moving. Like I'm still either painting or doing whatever I'm doing physically, but literally all my attention is on that one tiny little twitch, and I can't help it. Like that's just where it all goes. Or I get this like pinpoint sensation in my elbow. It's like all the attention goes there, and I'm like, I can feel the resistance to like, oh, is there something wrong? And also is feeling very intimate with it in the same context, like together. Like I'm like, wow, that's really freaking precious, that tiny little sensation. It's like become a fascination, like how I'm so fascinated with bugs and how like precious their tiny little details are. I feel that with this tiny little sensation in my elbow. Like it's so tiny, and like it's blinking in this pattern, and I'm not really thinking of it that way. That's how I'm, saying it back, but it's like, what in the world is that? Like it feels like such a big thing, yet it's so subtle. And it's just, I don't know, it's just precious. And then there's also the me there that's like, oh man, does that mean that I'm gonna have an illness? Like, and it's just, I don't know, weird.
That made me think of two things. One is, what I find amazing is how deep beliefs go. When I say beliefs, I guess I just mean value system. That like physical pain is like the last thing we want, right? But I can't say it's always like this, but a lot of times now, even when there's pain in a particular part of the body, like, real pain, I have like a couple medical things that cause pain. And if I just really, I guess I'm not doing it for whatever reason, the conditions just allow everything to really relax. That pain feels just like beautiful non-dual experience, like anything else. It's just aliveness. And right in the center of the pain, it's like I can't even find the pain. I can't find the center and then it's like, strangely, that energy of pain, everything becomes it. And then it's like, well, everything's that pain energy, but it's not pain energy because it's everything. And I don't know, I just like dissolves into clarity somehow, but it's still felt. I'm not saying that you can use this as a tool to avoid pain, because it's not like that, and you can't. But even pain surprises you in what you find that it actually is at the root of all of it. The other thing it made me think of, that I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but I remember when I was doing like a sesshin years and years ago in the Zen Center, probably 15 years ago or something. And it was like several days in, and like the whole body was so relaxed. Like I was completely relaxed. The mind was finally calm, reasonably, but it was just that pure relaxation, without mental comment, really. It was just relaxed. But I noticed my left pinky finger, like I could feel it vibrating. And it was like twitching a little bit. And I'd never noticed this before. And all of a sudden, like I was so distracted by it. Like I was like mad at it. Why aren't you relaxed? But it was more like, well, what is it? Why is it doing that? I didn't understand it. It was like this fundamental sense of like, I'm not in control of the body somehow. I don't know, it really hit me in a different way. And I could feel this whole dualistic thing get set up with that energy. And the finger, it was just like barely moving, just twitching. It was just one little finger. And it was so weird because like all the energy in the body was like relaxed, but this one was like a rebel. And it was like, no, I'm not going to relax. It just felt like that. And I was thinking like, it was kind of like comical and also really pissed me off at the same time. It pissed me off that it pissed me off. It didn't make any sense. And I was distracted with it for like a day, and it just stayed there. And then finally it relaxed and I forgot about it. Well, then years later, there was other times where the body was just fully relaxed and immersed and it felt good and whatever. And then all of a sudden that thing came back. but it would be related to like an emotion or a certain vasana or something. And I could actually feel like identity can hide in little places in your body, you know? And I guess I don't talk about this because it's like, what are you going to do with that information? You'll either have it experience like that or not. But for me, I could actually feel how a piece of identity could actually be rooted in a certain place in the body that I held a little tension in. And I could feel it like a little rebellious piece of self in there. And then I approached it very differently. I was like really fascinated, and I would just let my attention rest there and just feel into those energies. And I realized, like, first of all, how incredibly complex, I guess, and deep even the smallest little sensation can be. Like a lot of times when we're in our head, we're not even aware of our body. But if you really focus into one tiny little part of your body even, and the sensations that are there, and you're laying in bed, there's nothing else to do, and you're not interested in anything else, and all of your attention is just like completely immersed in that little area, all of the energy flows in that, the subtle energy flows become really amazing, actually, truly fascinating. And then you realize in a direct way how identity can hide in the physicality of the body, how beliefs can be physically encoded, how trauma can be physically encoded in the body. It's really fascinating, actually. And when you were talking about that stuff, that's totally what I thought of. And then it came back a couple of different times over time, and it was always when there was a certain movement of self-reflection or something, and it dissolved over time. I haven't felt it in a long time, but it's at the place now where it's like it's welcome. If it comes, I would be like, wow, it's like an old friend, you know. But I haven't felt it in a while.
Yeah, it's like we look for the identity in like the chakras. Like there's a lot of like spiritual practice around that, which I don't think is bad. But there's also like I think it's important to note that it's in the body. The chakras, any sort of special area, you know, the elbow is just as special, the pinky is just as special, as far as being a channel, being a portal to hold things.
Totally agree.
Say something, to speak to us. It's just like a different language. It's like the language of sensation.
I can tell you after my awakening, like back in '97, probably for about 3 or 4 years, I was almost constantly, maybe not constantly, but I was very frequently during the day aware of how much tension I held here in my jaw, my face, and my neck. It probably had to do with anxiety and like tension. It would amaze me though, because the moment I'd notice it, I'd be like, oh my God, it's happening again. I could relax it. So it was like an intentional relaxing again and again and again and again until it just started to relax itself naturally. But I was actually pretty amazed at how much tension was held there and how that tension encodes thought processes, self. Yeah, that was definitely a practice for me to just keep, I would walk around or even talk or do things with some attention in the jaw area and neck just so I could make sure it stayed a little bit relaxed. Yeah.
Angela, I'm super curious. Do you remember, was it always the same finger that had the sensation? Do you remember which finger it was?
Oh, it was my left pinky finger. It was, I can even tell where I can feel, not even in the body map, like by looking and touching it, I can feel the sensation where it was energetically in the hand. It was like the left side of the hand, like kind of like the base of the pinky finger and more on this edge. It was like in this area. Yeah. And I could let it move, like I could release it a little bit and it would go up into the arm and move around, but it wanted to go back in there. It would like hide in there because it was like, no, this is where I live. Doesn't make sense, but that's how it was for me.
Well, in Chinese medicine, they map out how emotional energy flows in acupuncture meridians, and so that would be a particular like type of emotional energy would be flowing in a meridian that goes through that point. Like it's a meridian associated with like impatience and can also be associated with hatred and cruelty. That the left pinky finger. So I just
yeah.
Like Rochelle said, there's a lot more going on than just chakras. That's what usually non-dual people are talking about, but it's
yeah. I remember the feeling of it, like the feeling of the identity portion of it, and yeah, it felt like an angry rebellion almost, like an angry child that, you know, just was pissed off at the life it kind of came into and how it was treated and stuff like that. If I could personify it into something, that would be kind of like that. Yeah, the funny thing was my relationship with it changed so much. When I first experienced it, I was like, what the hell is that doing here? But I was simultaneously surprised that I even cared, because I'm like, why do I care so much? Who cares if my pinky's twitching? But yet something in me knew like there was some major polarity set up with it already. And then as it came back, it was more like just total fascination and integration of it and acceptance of that energy and whatever. You know, there were also fears tied into about health. Like, okay, well, oh my gosh, what if it's the beginning of Parkinson's, or who knows? You know, anytime especially when we're young, and the first time we have something happen to our body that kind of makes us go, ooh, what if this is like a really bad illness coming on? You know, that's really scary. It's very unsettling in a place that we're not used to being unsettled in as young adults, you know. So there maybe is some of that with it a little bit too. I wanted to also, one other thing I wanted to say is Michael put this message up a while back, but I do want to point that out, and I agree. He said tension naturally gets released through inquiry and emotional work, and I would agree with that. There's definitely value to going right to it, especially if you can naturally do that. That's awesome. But I will say that it can be frustrating to try to do that for some people who have trouble with it. And then also you can kind of build a whole identity around always doing your somatic emotional work, but you're not really doing it. But you talk about it to everyone, and like I can go on and on and on and on. And you're not really making deep progress. If that happens, if that's happening to anybody, I would say maybe you're not doing enough inquiry. Like if you do the emotion work, you do the acceptance work, you do the allowing work, you do the focusing work, and inquire into your beliefs about things. Ultimately, those tensions naturally relax. The knots untie, and as Rochelle said, you don't have to get rid of anything, but your relationship with it changes dramatically. It becomes a very intimate experience, and there's no realization contingent upon it. It's not like, oh, I have to get my medical stuff sorted out before I wake up, or realization's not like that. It doesn't care how your life is. It doesn't care how much of a disaster your life is. If realization is going to occur, it's going to occur. Is physical pain always emotional? That's a really interesting question. There's an easy way to talk about this that's really, I think, kind of distorted and can be insensitive. And to be like, well, if anything physically painful happens to you, it's your karma. Like you deserved it somehow, or you caused it in a past life or something. And I don't approach it that way. And I don't think it's reasonable to talk about it that way, because I just don't buy it. But I do notice it's interesting, like pain states tend to come in like clusters, and they'll kind of all be there over the same period of time, over a day or two or three. And then, it's like this pain, then it's that pain, and this one's getting your attention. But the whole time there's this background sense of, I don't want the pain, of I need to sort all this out before I can go live. This is getting in my way. This is slowing me down from doing the things I want to do. That sense of the self apart from the pain, the one who feels the pain, that seems to have this funky relationship with the pain. And it seems like that will all kind of arise at one time often. And then it kind of maybe collapses, it goes away. And then you go about your business and there's relief after or whatever. And then all of a sudden you notice there are other pains going on, and you have a complete interconnected experience with them. There's no resistance, and you don't care. You notice the pain, but it's like integrated. You can penetrate it with attention. It just becomes more non-dual, right? And I've had that experience many times, and I think I've seen other people have the same experience, where even that, like I said, even pain, at some level, you can find some identity tied into the one who doesn't want to feel the pain or wants to control the pain. And by approaching those identities and incorporating those identities and dissolving those identities into more clarity, then even pain you just have a radically different relationship with even pain. So there's very often, if not always, some kind of emotional component, but I wouldn't even call it emotional, as I would call it resistance patterns of some kind. like identity stuff around pain. It's an interesting topic. I mean, I've done a lot of work like in medically with pain, with family medicine. We did some pain stuff with anesthesia. Obviously, there's chronic pain as a specialty and so forth. And it's amazing to see how different people react to pain, how differently. Some people just seem to just be fine with it somehow. You know, I'm sure they wouldn't prefer it, but other people, it's like the resistance is so intense, they're just killing themselves because they don't want to feel it. But if you ask, what they'll tell you about it is it's like a lot of fear around it. Like, oh my God, I'm afraid it's going to stay here forever. I need to find the right thing to do about it. I need to this and that and that. It's more like this scared animal trying to avoid the cage. Or it's like, no, I don't want to I don't want to feel it. I don't want to do it. But that takes pain, which is, I guess, naturally not comfortable by definition, and amplifies it 10 times. So people have intensely different responses to pain, but that's oversimplifying it because a lot goes into that as well. A lot of emotional stuff goes into it. A lot of what is your medical history? You know, if you've been on chronic opioids, you have a completely different sensory response to pain now because it's changed your receptors and stuff. Is there neuropathic pain? Is there physical, other types of pain? Like, pain is a complex thing. It's a complex issue. But what I can say is acceptance and ownership, connection with the physical, with the body, energy work, like these things make a huge difference whether or not you're in pain. Like whether or not the pain has a different etiology that can be treated or goes away on its own, your relationship with pain can dramatically change and improve through these kinds of practices, through acceptance, emotion work, energy work.
It's like the one apart from the pain is the emotion.
Yeah, totally. Well, another way of talking about it's interesting is you think so pain is like, if you make a list of the things people don't want, pain is like the top of the list usually, right? I would almost say loss of, like, humiliation is probably really the top of the list, but we're so afraid of it we don't even think about it. But pain, yeah, no one wants pain. Like, I'm not afraid to die, but I'm afraid to feel a lot of pain, right? That's like a thing we might say. And it makes sense, right? Pain by definition is uncomfortable. But what's interesting is, like, okay, you can ask yourself, like, well, what's the worst thing I would ever want to see my child have it happen to them, for them to be in pain, right? Any parent can relate to your animal, your dog, your cat, your child. You would never want to see them in pain. And yet I watched a series of documentaries on a disorder called, I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically you don't feel pain. So children are born and they actually don't feel pain at all. And if you watch videos of them, it's really disturbing because they don't feel any pain. They can fall off a roof and they have no pain. So the dog will just run them over completely and it scratches all over their face and they just get up and they don't look disturbed at all. They don't care. And people who have children like this, it's really devastating because, like, they'll have a toddler who's 2 years old. Like, one was a little girl who was 2 or 3 years old and she already lost her eye because she scratched her eye so much she destroyed her eye and they had to take her eye out. She had broken all these bones already, and the kids have no idea. There was another one, as like a young teen guy who started making videos of him doing all these crazy stunts because his friends would, like, encourage him, like, dude, do this, do that, because he's like, I had no fear. I would jump off anything. I didn't care. And he was like breaking bones and stuff, but he didn't feel it. And it's really disturbing, right? So you can say, well, pain is the worst thing I could experience, right? In a certain sense, pain is the worst thing I'd want to see my child have. And yet, if you could choose it, would you have your child feel no pain at all? Of course you wouldn't. Pain is a survival instinct. Pain, we wouldn't be here without pain, without the physical experience of, oh my God, that's hot, I got to get away from it. Fear, pain, these are survival instincts. These allow life to even be. These allow us to experience it all. So at some level, you have a deep respect for it, for these physiologic energies, of course, that they're what make experience possible. They're what make life possible. So that's an intellectual way to approach it, but you can actually come into a place where you have that kind of intimacy with even pain, physically and emotionally. All right, we're over time, but if anyone has any other questions or anything to say.
One other thing too, with Alma's question, I think it also matters what we define as emotion, because I think we all define emotion differently. And so I don't know. I think it's just kind of a really large subject. It's not like a simple answer.
Yeah, I agree. But what's interesting, I think, is that often these pain states, pain situations, medical diagnoses, near-death experiences that happen that really shake us, if we're open to the lesson, they often can show us something that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise in life. They show us a very, very raw way of entering vulnerability, of helplessness. I mean, they show us things that you would never purposely go out and learn, but what a gift they are, right? Tragedy can be a really huge gift. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, of course, but if it happens, you have a huge opportunity to open, if nothing else, open your heart and soul to the suffering of the world, suffering of humanity, by feeling that trauma, by feeling that loss, that grief, whatever it is. But even beyond that, like there's an ability to often go even beyond the boundaries of your identity through the dissolution and letting go that often comes with tragedy. Okay, I think we have one more in the series next week, so we'll do it. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's nice seeing you all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Y'all have a good week.
Thank you, Angelo, and everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Yeah,
night.
you're welcome. Nice to see you guys. Good night.